I still remember the sound of the coffee machine humming behind me, the comforting churn that had started nearly every workday for the past 11 years. I had just poured oat milk into my cup when Logan Hale walked in. He didn't say good morning, didn't make eye contact. He just stared at me like I was a pile of outdated folders. "Emma, I need to see you in my office. Now." No smile, no warmth, just command. Logan had recently become CEO of Thorne and Hale, not because he'd earned it, but because he inherited it. His father, Mr. Hale, built this place. Logan seemed determined to hollow it out and wear the shell. I followed him down the hall in silence, past the very team I'd trained from scratch, past desks filled with people I'd hired, mentored, championed. Inside his glass-walled office, he didn't even sit. "You're fired," he said, flipping through papers like he was choosing a sandwich. "Effective immediately. We don't need dead weight slowing this place down." I blinked. I didn't speak. I didn't scream. I smiled. "Understood. Have a great day, Logan." My exit was silent. I walked past my team with the same posture I'd had on my best days. Back straight, chin up, voice calm. A few looked up, sensing something wasn't right. I gave them a small practiced smile and a subtle shake of the head. "Don't ask, don't follow, just let me go." At my desk, I packed methodically, the framed photo of my niece, the glass award for client retention, a leather-bound notebook filled with 11 years of late nights, weekend calls, and strategic miracles no one ever saw. I didn't cry. I didn't text anyone. I just drove home in the rain, Seattle's signature drizzle clinging to the windshield like static. I sat on the couch, untouched coffee growing cold beside me, and just breathed. For the first time in months, I wasn't chasing deadlines or smoothing over a client's last-minute panic. But peace wasn't what I felt. It was something sharper, something unsettled. The timing was wrong. Thorne and Hale was just days away from closing the Bridgecrest Global contract, a deal I had spent over 6 months building. I knew the CEO's pain points, his daughter's wedding date, his cultural expectations around negotiation pacing. The final presentation was scheduled for Friday. I had everything mapped out. I was the sole point of contact. And now, I was gone? The realization kept circling me all night. It wasn't the insult that stung. It was the stupidity. Had Logan even looked at the contract? He'd fired me like I was a placeholder. But he never asked what I was holding. By sunrise, I was still wide awake, replaying the moment. "We don't need dead weight." He thought he was streamlining. But if he had really wanted to streamline, he would have opened the contract folder labeled BG North America. Page 3, Section 4.2. Client representative must maintain continuity through negotiation closure. Lead negotiator cannot be replaced post-presentation without signed written consent from all parties involved. It was a clause Mr. Hale himself had insisted on 3 years ago. After a disastrous acquisition where an unplanned leadership change cost us a 7-figure account, I knew because I helped draft it. Logan never read it. That much was clear now. And that meant he had no idea that by firing me, he may have just torpedoed the company's most important deal in 5 years. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream, but I knew this. Logan Hale had just made his first real executive decision, and the fallout was coming fast. At 9:07 a.m., my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. My chest was still tight from the events of the day before, and the last thing I wanted was another blow. But something told me to pick up. "Emma, it's Charles Hale." The voice hit like a jolt of electricity. The Charles Hale, founder of Thorne and Hale. The man who had hired me 11 years ago with a handshake and a challenge. Make client services the backbone of this place. "Why the hell did you leave the office yesterday?" I sat up straighter on my couch. My voice caught for a moment before I responded. "Logan fired me." The silence on the other end felt like gravity. I could hear rustling, paper shifting, a door slamming shut. "He did what?" "He called me lazy, dead weight. Said it was effective immediately." Another pause. Longer this time. I imagined him sitting in his office, probably the same one I used to visit with quarterly reports and contract drafts, staring at the contract binder in disbelief. "Emma, did he even read the Bridgecrest agreement?" My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "You were the lead negotiator, correct?" "Yes, I handled every stage of the process." Then he has no idea what he's done. There was a low groan, followed by more paper shuffling. That contract has your name written into the negotiation clause. It's airtight. We added it after the Ridgebrook fallout. Without you, the deal can't be finalized. Not legally, not practically. I stared at the wall across from me, heart pounding. My breath slowed. The power shifted inside me like a lever being thrown. You mean they won't sign without me? Emma, they can't. Not unless we rewrite and reinitiate every section of the agreement. And Bridgecrest doesn't tolerate renegotiations. Their CEO specifically requested continuity. That's why your name is on that clause. A laugh slipped out of me. Dry, bitter, incredulous. So Logan just shot himself in the foot? No, Charles said, his voice cold with restrained fury. He aimed the gun at you and pulled the trigger without looking. Now he's going to find out that he was standing on the same floorboard. The call ended abruptly. I sat motionless, letting it all wash over me. All those years of staying late, of managing egos and disasters. And Logan Hale tried to erase it in 5 minutes with a lazy insult and a desk clearing. He didn't just underestimate me. He failed to understand the value I brought. That wasn't just short-sighted. It was dangerous. And now? That danger wasn't mine to carry anymore. It belonged to him. I pulled the Bridgecrest contract from my cloud backup that same morning. Every clause, every timestamp, every version tracked and secured. I knew it by heart, but seeing it again was like flipping through an old diary, except this one had legal teeth. Page 3, Section 4.2. Negotiation authority resides solely with the named account executive, E. Carter, through final execution. Replacement of said executive without written approval from Bridgecrest Global voids negotiation progress and requires full renegotiation. Legalese, yes, but in plain English, they could not close without me. And Logan? He had just booted the only person who could finish the deal. That wasn't just poor leadership, that was corporate malpractice. The irony made me want to laugh and scream at the same time. I remembered the meeting 3 years ago when Mr. Hale insisted we add the clause after Ridgebrook yanked their agreement because their lead negotiator vanished mid-process. That debacle cost the company nearly $3.4 million and several clients in Europe. We weren't going to repeat that mistake, I made sure of it. And Logan, the self-appointed visionary who couldn't be bothered to read beyond the executive summary, had walked directly into that legal tripwire. But that wasn't even the part that rattled me. What really hit me was this. He didn't even ask. He never checked with legal, never asked the team, never paused to consider the complexity of what I was managing. He looked at me, a woman in her 40s with quiet authority and a stack of historical client files, and saw expendable. No performance review, no transition plan, just an impulsive power play. That kind of recklessness isn't just insulting, it's dangerous, especially in a firm that lives and dies by contract law and client trust. By mid-morning, my phone was buzzing like a trapped hornet. First it was Logan. I let it go to voicemail. Then HR. Then legal. Then the receptionist. Then, finally, a message from Charles Hale. Emma, I need to see you. Today. This isn't just about the contract anymore. I didn't reply right away. I needed time, not to plan revenge. I'm not built for vengeance, but to reclaim my agency. Because walking back into that building couldn't look like desperation. It had to be deliberate, strategic. Logan had tried to erase me with one sentence, but the ink hadn't dried, and now the same clause he ignored would write me right back in. But this time, on my terms. By 10:13 a.m., the scramble had begun. I hadn't returned any calls. I hadn't responded to a single email, but apparently silence says more than words ever could. The first voicemail came from Logan. Emma, it seems there was a misunderstanding yesterday. I may have acted too quickly. We need to talk. Please come in. It's urgent. Urgent. Not sorry. Not I made a mistake. Just panic, hidden behind polished PR language. I sipped my now cold coffee and let it play twice, just to hear the fear under the surface. Then the receptionist called. Then the general counsel. Even the woman from accounting who always avoided eye contact at staff events left me a breathless message. I think you need to come in. Something's happening. Everyone's panicking. At 10:32, my phone rang again. This time, I picked up. The caller ID read Nicole W., a former teammate from the early days, someone I'd trained myself. Emma, she said in a rushed whisper, you won't believe what's happening here. Try me. Charles just stormed into the glass boardroom with the Bridgecrest contract in hand. Everyone was there. Legal, sales, strategy. He slammed it on the table and said, "Did you read this before firing Emma?" I sat up straighter. And? Logan tried to deflect, said he was realigning talent and streamlining, but Charles flipped to that clause, your clause, the one that makes you the only authorized negotiator. You could hear a pin drop. I could picture it, that cold, polished glass room, Charles standing like a storm about to hit land, Logan trying to bluff his way out of a corner that didn't exist. And then what? I asked. Nicole lowered her voice even further. Charles told him, right there in front of everyone, if this deal falls through, your future here becomes negotiable. I smiled, not out of spite, out of validation. Nicole, thank you. Whatever you're planning, she said, you're holding all the cards now. Everyone knows it. We hung up. I stared at my phone for a long while, watching the flood of missed calls pile up. This wasn't a comeback moment, this was leverage. And leverage only works when you know what to ask for. By 11:15, a text came in from Charles himself. Emma, I'm sincerely sorry. This should never have happened. I'd like you to come in, not just to save the deal, but to speak, one-on-one. I didn't reply immediately, because walking back in that building wouldn't be about saving their crisis. It would be about defining my worth and what would no longer be negotiable. I sent a message instead. I'll consider returning to finalize the Bridgecrest deal, but only after we speak privately and under new terms. Then I stood, changed out of my sweatshirt, and began preparing, not for a rescue mission, but for a reintroduction. I didn't use the employee entrance. When I arrived at Thorn and Hale, it was 12:08 p.m., prime lunchtime, the lobby buzzing. I walked through the main doors in a tailored navy blazer, crisp white blouse, and heels that echoed across the polished concrete floor with every step. People looked up, conversations stopped. They had seen me leave 24 hours ago with a single cardboard box. Now I was back. Not sneaking in, not escorted, not apologizing. Walking tall, on my own terms. The receptionist stood the moment she saw me. Emma, Mr. Hale is expecting you, right this way. I nodded politely, following her past open-concept desks and strategically placed succulents. It was impossible to ignore the shift in energy. Heads turned, brows raised. Some people smiled in quiet solidarity. Others just stared, unsure of what this return meant. I passed Logan in the hallway. He was mid-conversation with a junior associate, arms folded like a man trying to appear in control. But the moment our eyes met, his mask cracked, slightly, just enough. He didn't speak. Neither did I, because there was nothing left to say. Mr. Hale was waiting by his office door. He gave me a small nod, not as a superior, but as a man who understood that this meeting would not be on his terms alone. Emma, he said, thank you for coming. I didn't offer my hand. I didn't smile. I walked past him and took a seat across from his desk, calm, direct, settled. The office was quiet, sunlight spilling across the oak furniture like a stage light. He closed the door behind him and sat. What happened to you was unacceptable, he said. And it's my fault. I said nothing. He went on. I gave Logan too much authority, too soon. I wanted him to prove himself, but I didn't expect him to burn bridges before learning how to build them. There was sincerity in his voice, and weariness. You didn't deserve that treatment, he added. And frankly, it almost cost us everything. I nodded, slowly. Yes, it did. He pulled out a legal pad. I read the full Bridgecrest contract again this morning. You're the only person authorized to close. And frankly, you're the only person I trust to close. So what are you offering? I asked. Your position back, with full authority over the account. Any conditions you need, we'll meet them. I leaned forward. Then here's what I want. A revised contract in writing. No interference from Logan. Direct reporting line to you. Clear autonomy. Done. And one more thing, I said. This doesn't happen again. Not to me. Not to anyone else under your roof. He nodded. Not defensively, not begrudgingly, but with the understanding of someone who had finally recognized the full extent of the damage. You have my word. I stood. The moment I stepped back into the hallway, I saw Logan glance up from his desk. His expression, not rage, realization that his power was no longer real and never truly had been. By 1 o'clock p.m., the boardroom was ready. The Bridgecrest Global team was due any minute, and I had 30 minutes to review every page, every number, every clause I'd once built from scratch. The air in the room was cool and still, the table polished to a perfect shine. At the head, a small placard read, Lead Negotiator, Emma Carter. I placed the Arabic translated copy of the agreement beside the English one, a detail I hadn't been required to prepare, but one I knew would be noticed. Through the glass walls, I saw Logan pacing near the hallway, back and forth like a man caged inside the fortress he tried to seize. He was talking to someone on his phone, brows furrowed, movements frantic. Then, like a scene from a silent film, Charles Hale stepped in front of him. Their conversation was muffled, but the shift in body language said everything. Logan's hands were up, defensive. Charles's jaw was set. I saw a pointed finger, a slow headshake, then a final gesture that needed no words. Step back. Logan turned red, glared at me, and walked away. That was the last time I saw him that day. At 1:30 sharp, the Bridgecrest team arrived. Mr. Saeed, the CEO, walked in flanked by his aides. He was tall, formal, famously no-nonsense, known in our industry as the man who'd walk out of a deal mid-sentence if he sensed disorganization. I greeted him in Arabic, his expression softened, just slightly, and he gave a rare nod of approval. You remembered, he said. Respect goes a long way. The meeting began. It moved with precision, no tension, no surprises. We clarified the final delivery timelines, smoothed out the international compliance clauses, and confirmed the phased rollout schedule. 2 hours passed like 20 minutes. By 3:30 p.m., the deal was signed. The handshake was firm. The Bridgecrest team exited with smiles, but not broad ones, but the kind you get from people who trust you to deliver exactly what you promised. After they left, Charles stepped into the room, the door clicking shut behind him. He looked at the signed documents on the table, like they were a pair of life jackets after a storm. You saved us, he said. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. You owe your company a leader, I replied, one who knows the difference between power and responsibility. He nodded slowly. There was no ceremony, no applause, no parade. But the silence felt like vindication. Because I hadn't just closed a deal, I'd drawn a line. And while Logan paced the halls looking for someone else to blame, I walked out of the boardroom with my legacy intact and my leverage growing. The celebration didn't last long. By the following Monday, I noticed the first crack. It started with an email, a reimbursement request for my travel to the Bridgecrest meeting, a routine form. I'd submitted it on time, like always, but the finance system flagged it as incomplete. Strange. Then, the documents I forwarded for regional compliance review came back to me, unsigned, without comment. The platform's audit log showed the recipient had viewed them. Twice. Yet no explanation, no feedback. At first, I chalked it up to growing pains. Tension after a high-stakes win. Maybe people were just adjusting to my return. But then something deeper shifted. One morning, I received a message from a European partner we'd worked with before. Polite but confused. Just wanted to confirm, is this your new process for client handover? The instructions we received don't match our previous workflows. Attached was an email. It was from me. Or so it appeared, only I had never sent it. The tone was off, the formatting wrong. And the data? Outdated. Even the timestamp was suspicious. Sent from a generic workstation in the main break room at 6:11 p.m. I was long gone by then. I stared at the screen, stomach tightening. Someone had accessed my account credentials. Someone had sent false information, deliberately, in my name. I reported it to the internal systems team. They promised to investigate. Could be phishing, they said. But I knew better. The trail wasn't coming from outside the building. It was someone inside. My instincts screamed a name, Logan. He'd failed to remove me, failed to silence me, failed to salvage the deal he nearly ruined. And now? Now he was trying to discredit me. no longer with orders, but with whispers, with missing approvals, with just enough doubt to corrode reputation over time. It was an old game. I'd seen it before. At my first job, fresh out of grad school, I'd worked under a director who used the same tactics: passive sabotage, denial of resources, quiet erasure. People don't always push you out with a pink slip. Sometimes they just pull the floor from under your feet, one floorboard at a time. But I wasn't 23 anymore. I didn't need anyone to tell me when I was under attack. This time, I documented everything: every flagged expense, every unsent email, every discrepancy in approvals, login times, system logs. I kept a separate notebook, physical, dated, tucked into my laptop bag. I began tracking every irregularity, every internal delay. I didn't lash out, I didn't make noise, because I knew something Logan didn't. Paper beats power, and receipts beat rhetoric. He wanted me to feel isolated, unstable, disposable, but all he was doing was building my case. The building felt colder that week, not because of the weather — Seattle was stuck in its usual overcast mood — but because the air between people had changed. Conversations stopped when I entered a room. Some colleagues smiled too brightly. Others avoided eye contact altogether. I wasn't paranoid, I was observant. The difference is important. Then came the meeting request. Audit Committee. Request for informal interview. Emma Carter. It was framed as informal. It didn't feel that way. The committee had converted one of the old conference rooms into a war room, walls lined with printed logs, a whiteboard covered in timestamps, access points, device IDs. David, the internal audit lead, greeted me with a firm handshake and tired eyes. "Emma, thanks for coming. We've uncovered a few anomalies." He tapped a screen and pulled up the now infamous fake email, the one that had caused our overseas partner to question protocol. We traced this to a shared terminal in the break room. The credentials were manually entered. I frowned. So someone logged in as me? He nodded. No sign of phishing, no malware. Whoever did this had internal access and the ability to copy your login manually. My skin went cold. This wasn't a one-off. It was a calculated effort, a campaign. "We've found other incidents," he added. "Spreadsheets edited under your name, files sent with incorrect data, always traced back to shared workstations." And then he said the thing I'd both expected and dreaded. "We've noticed repeated access patterns tied to Logan Hale's executive assistant's login, after hours, during weekends, just long enough to plant something, not long enough to get caught." I sat back, folded my arms. "Are you accusing him?" David chose his words carefully. "We're not accusing anyone yet, but we have a pattern and a growing list of impacted files, all connected to your work." I exhaled slowly. It was sabotage, no longer subtle, no longer deniable. I asked the only question that mattered. "What happens next?" David hesitated. Then, "Charles Hale has asked us to prepare a report, full detail, no filters. He wants it all." I nodded. "Good. I want to be there when it's presented." He looked surprised. "You're not required." "I will be there," I said firmly. "If someone's going to try and destroy my name in this company, they should at least have to look me in the eye while they do it." That night, I stayed in the office late, not to finish work, but to reflect. I thought of the others, good people, who had left quietly in the past year, colleagues who'd been edged out without ever knowing why. Now I wondered how many of them had been targets before me. Logan thought he was playing chess, but all he'd done was leave digital fingerprints on every piece. And I was holding the board. The executive boardroom was already half full when I arrived the next morning. It was 8:54 a.m. The meeting was set for 9 o'clock sharp, but no one in that room was treating it like business as usual. David sat at one end, flanked by two members of the internal audit team. Their faces were grim, folders stacked beside glowing monitors. Charles Hale stood by the window, hands in his pockets, eyes on the skyline. I took a seat without being asked. At 9:05, the door opened. Logan walked in like he had somewhere better to be. Expensive suit, smirk fully activated, phone still in hand. He stopped short when he saw me. "She's not on the audit committee," he said flatly. Charles didn't even turn. "She's here at my request." Logan shifted. This is supposed to be confidential. I didn't wait for Charles this time. Then you should have kept it that way when you used company resources to fabricate internal emails under my name. Logan scoffed. That's ridiculous. David tapped a file. The projector on the wall came to life, line after line of login history, session timestamps, IP addresses, terminal locations. We traced multiple anomalies to your assistant's login, David said. Files tied to Ms. Carter's credentials, altered or misrouted, spreadsheets overwritten, approvals blocked, always during periods when no one else was logged in. You're reaching, Logan said, his tone tightening. This is clearly a vendetta. She's bitter about being let go. I didn't flinch. You didn't let me go, I replied evenly. You tried to erase me, and you nearly sabotaged the company's largest contract in 5 years. Charles turned at that. His voice was low, controlled. I gave you a chance, Logan. I gave you more than one. And you've spent every one of them making decisions that damage this company and the people holding it up. Logan opened his mouth, but Charles cut him off. This isn't a misunderstanding, it's a pattern, and I'm done ignoring it. The room went still. Then Charles turned to David. The board will review your full report, but until then, effective immediately, Logan Hale is suspended from all company operations. Silence. Logan stared at him. For once, his face didn't hide anything. Shock, panic, disbelief. He turned to me one last time, but there was nothing left to say. No smirk, no snide remark. Just a man who had finally realized none of his usual tricks would work this time. He walked out in silence, and I stayed. Charles sank into a chair, exhausted, the lines around his eyes deeper than I'd ever seen them. I failed him, he murmured. As a leader, maybe even as a father. I paused, then said softly, You can't lead someone who refuses to grow, but you still have a company to lead. You still have that choice. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw not just regret, but resolve. 2 weeks passed, 2 quiet, heavy weeks, where Logan's name drifted through the halls in whispers, not meetings. He didn't return after the audit, no emails, no closed-door drama. Just a suspension that quietly morphed into termination, sealed behind closed doors, and a non-disclosure agreement. There was no official memo, no send-off. Just a change in the internal directory, and a brief line in a leadership update. We thank Logan Hale for his time at Thorne and Hale, and wish him the best in future endeavors. But word spreads. Everyone knew. The audit report was damning. Falsified emails, access logs, timestamps, patterns of manipulation too detailed to dismiss. And while Charles Hale may have spared his son from a public disgrace, he couldn't protect him from the judgment of an entire company. As for me, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, like I could finally exhale. One afternoon, Charles called me into his office. No assistants, no agenda, just him, seated behind his desk with a closed folder in front of him. Close the door, he said. I did. He looked up, serious but not somber. Emma, I've had a lot of time to think about this company, about who should be leading the parts that matter most. He slid the folder across the desk. Inside, an offer letter. Director of Client Strategy. An executive-level role, reporting directly to Charles. Full autonomy. Strategic oversight of our largest accounts. Budget authority. A seat at the leadership table I had once stood outside for over a decade. I stared at it for a long moment. I didn't ask for this. That's exactly why you deserve it, he replied. I closed the folder. If I accept this, I want more than a title. I want a voice in how we rebuild. I want to shape the culture. From the inside. No more silence. No more games. He nodded slowly, a faint smile pulling at the corners of his mouth. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. Later that evening, I stood alone in my new office, temporary, while renovations were underway. The nameplate hadn't arrived yet, but the air was different, lighter. For years I had walked these halls wondering if anyone really saw what I did. The late nights, the client recoveries, the quiet saves. I had thought that staying silent was the price of stability. But silence had almost cost me everything. This wasn't about Logan anymore. This was about remembering that competence is not arrogance. that boundaries are not betrayal, that resilience is not weakness. I hadn't just survived sabotage, I'd led through it. And more importantly, I hadn't become bitter. That, to me, was the real win. I didn't waste time hanging plaques. The day after I accepted the promotion, I held my first department-wide meeting. No slide deck, no buzzwords, just me, standing in front of a whiteboard with two words written at the top: start over. Because that's what we needed, not a rebrand, not a performance memo, a cultural reset. Over the next few weeks, I made quiet, intentional moves. I reopened communication lines that had been blocked by fear. I invited back two team leads who had quietly left during Logan's reign. Both women, both smart, both burned out by politics and power plays. I created an anonymous reporting system. No approvals needed, no chain of command to climb, just truth submitted freely. The messages were raw, honest, and sometimes heartbreaking. I was afraid to speak up. I watched a coworker get isolated for asking too many questions. I thought it was just me. It wasn't. And now, finally, it didn't have to be. I also started meeting with younger employees over coffee. Some of them had been interns when I was still fighting for a seat at the table. Now they were account associates, analysts, project leads. One of them, Mia, a 25-year-old rising star in strategy, stayed after one session. "How did you stay strong through all of that?" she asked. "I watched it happen. I saw the way they treated you. And you still showed up." I didn't sugarcoat it. I stayed strong by not doing it alone. I documented. I kept receipts. I knew who I was, even when no one else seemed to. She nodded slowly, then added, "I want to learn how to do that." That moment stayed with me, not because it was flattering, but because it was why I came back. Not for the job, not even for the legacy, but to build something better for everyone who would come after me. I implemented new training for managers, focused not just on KPIs, but on listening, on conflict de-escalation, on preventing the subtle, slow-moving sabotage I'd endured. Every team now had monthly check-ins, not for productivity, but for workplace climate. Anonymous participation optional, results sent directly to me. Slowly, things shifted. There were more open doors, more hallway laughter. People weren't glancing over their shoulders anymore. The company was still thorn and hail, but now it felt like a place where people could breathe again. And I wasn't just another name in the system. I was the one rewriting the rules, because real leadership isn't just about salvaging deals. It's about seeing people and protecting them when no one else will. Some victories don't come with trophies. They come in moments, small, quiet affirmations that the storm has passed and you're still standing. A year later, I sat on the rooftop patio of our downtown office, coffee in hand, as the sun broke through Seattle's endless gray. Below, traffic buzzed. Inside, the team was preparing for a quarterly review I no longer had to run alone. And I thought, this feels like peace. Not the kind you get when everyone likes you, the kind you earn when you've stopped needing that. Since Logan's exit, the company hadn't just stabilized, it had evolved. We'd launched a mentorship program for underrepresented employees. We'd restructured performance reviews to prioritize long-term leadership, not short-term theatrics. We even brought in outside consultants to audit our workplace culture, because if we couldn't face our blind spots, we couldn't grow. But the biggest change? People weren't afraid to speak anymore. And that meant everything. I still got emails from women across the company, some I'd barely spoken to before, others I'd mentored in passing. Their stories echoed mine in different forms. I used to think I had to endure to succeed. You showed me I could lead without shrinking. Watching you stay calm in chaos reminded me I didn't have to compromise to survive. One message stood out. It came from a former intern named Natalie, who had left years ago after facing microaggressions and being overlooked repeatedly. She wrote, "I watched from afar when you stood up to him. I watched you rebuild without bitterness. It helped me believe I could return to this industry someday, on my terms. Thank you." I cried reading it, because that's the thing they don't tell you. Sometimes the loudest impact is the one you never hear until much later. Logan thought legacy came from titles, from controlling the narrative, from forcing people to respect him. But real legacy? It's what people say when you're not in the room. It's how safe they feel because you walked before them and cleared a path. As for me, I no longer chased approval. I no longer flinched when I hit resistance. I'd learned that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, "Not today. Not again. I know who I am, and you don't get to define me." So if you're where I once was, gaslit, erased, underestimated, hear this. You are not crazy. You are not too much. And you are not alone. You don't need permission to reclaim your voice. You only need one moment of courage to change everything, and when you do, someone else, watching, waiting, will rise because of you, just like I did.